What's happening, everybody? What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. If you've never been here before, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. Check out all the content that I have up there. Maybe you'll find some things of interest. Everybody else, welcome back to the channel. I appreciate you, and thank you for tuning in again. I told a story a couple of days ago about when a friend does you wrong, how there's payback for that, or there should be payback for that. So that was a story about how some friends are truly enemies in the long run. But this is a story that takes a little twist because it involves some family, and it's about when someone in the family can do you wrong. Or, well, you know what? I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to let you watch. Hopefully, you enjoy it. And then you let me know in the end. And we'll take it right from there. So, hopefully you enjoy the video and let me know what you think at the end, and I'll get back to you. So here we go. I had an Aunt Elaine. My Aunt Elaine was my grandmother's sister, and we used to go out to Brooklyn to see her all the time. And my mother had an on and off relationship with my Aunt Elaine. They would talk for a year, then they wouldn't talk, then they would talk for another 6 months, then they wouldn't talk for 2 years. And that's how it was throughout my childhood. And I was going to see my Aunt Elaine with my mother. We would drive from Long Island into Brooklyn, and my grandmother and my Aunt Elaine would sit at the coffee table in the kitchen and drink their coffee and smoke their cigarettes like two old yentas, right? They'd sit in there and talk. And I loved going to see my Aunt Elaine because when I was like 9, 10 years old, I loved her. She was great. She used to hand me $100 bill and tell me, go to the store and get us milk for coffee. And I would run down the block in Brooklyn. I'd get the gallon of milk and bring it back, and she'd tell me, keep the change. I had $98 in change. She was really good like that. We won't talk about that she stole $2 million from the family. When her father died, she was able to swindle all the money from the sisters, and the sisters stopped talking to her. And this is why that's a whole different story. This is why there was an on and off relationship. Who knows? But we used to go out there for a little while and then stop. But I loved my Aunt Elaine. There was a pussy willow tree once in my backyard, and I broke a branch off. I brought her the branch of pretty pussy willows. And she says, next time you don't bring me the branch, you bring me the whole tree. So I took an axe and I chopped down the neighbor's tree. I was like 12 years old, and I dragged the tree onto the porch and said, there's the whole tree. Crazy, but I was a kid. Anyway, we stopped going to see her. My mother and my aunt stopped talking when I was about 13 years old, and we stopped going out to Brooklyn. And my aunt had a son named Michael. So every time my mother would go out there to sit with Aunt Elaine in the kitchen and have their coffee, I'd hang out with my cousin Michael, who was about 10 years older than me. He was one of these headbangers, heavy metal guys with the long hair, the black leather jacket, the black bracelet. And like I said, he was 10 years older. So when I was 12 years old going out there, 13 years old, he was 23 years old. He was already into drugs. He was a wild kid, right? They lived in a gorgeous brownstone in Brooklyn. And so at 13, we stopped going out there. I don't see my Aunt Elaine for about 7 years. Nothing at all. No contact with the family. My mother has no contact with her at all. And I'm living in my own apartment, and there's a knock on the door. Now I'm about 20 years old, 21 years old at the time. And I answer the door, and there's my Aunt Elaine. And she's crying. And I hadn't seen her in 7 years. I didn't even know how she found me, but she found where I lived. And Aunt Elaine, what's the matter? I bring her in the house. I bring her upstairs, and I have to calm her down. She's hysterical, and she's hurt. Her arm is hurt. And I said, "What's the matter? What happened? Tell me what happened." And she said, "Michael pushed me down a flight of stairs." Michael is her son, my cousin. I said, "What are you talking about? What happened?" She said, "Michael brought a pit bull home. I told him I didn't want the dog in the house because Michael's very irresponsible." She says, and in Brooklyn, the back porches were like on stilts. They were like raised in the air. She's like, "I told him I didn't want the dog. There was no room for it." And he took a chainsaw and sawed the back porch down. So the whole porch fell to the ground. She says, then he was walking up to the room. I was yelling at him. I went up there to have a conversation with him. We're screaming, and he pushed me down the steps. And I couldn't believe that he pushed my aunt down a flight of steps. He pushed his mother down a flight of steps, who's 70 years old at this time. She's lucky she survived. and she was hurt. And so the first thing I do is I call my mother and say, listen, Mom, Aunt Elaine is here. You need to come get her, regardless if you guys are talking or not. And so my mother is on her way. And my aunt tells me, I adopted Michael as a little boy and I did everything in the world for him. I never had heard that before. So I said, what do you mean you adopted him? She says, I could never have children. She says, and so I adopted Michael when he was 1 year old. I said, so he's not my cousin? This was bad information to give me because I was already ready to go out to Brooklyn and get Michael for pushing my aunt down a flight of steps. Now that she told me that he was not my actual blood, it's going to be worse, and don't get me wrong about adoption. I understand if someone is adopted, they are still part of the family. You love them because they are part of the family. They're just like blood. But in my 20-year-old mind at the time, that gave me justification, more justification. Like, this guy's got some balls. This woman adopted him and took care of him and gave him everything in the world, and he ends up pushing her down a flight of steps. So by this time, my mother shows up. And the next morning, I called my friend Craig. I said, yo, we're going to go out to Brooklyn. I want to go see my cousin. I really don't have a plan on what I'm going to do yet. But me and my buddy Craig drive out to Brooklyn, and I knock on the door, and my cousin answers the door, and he got a set of works in his arm. In other words, he's shooting heroin. He's got the needle in his arm. When he answers the front door, yo, what's up? And he still looks crazy with the long hair, and like I said, like the heavy metal headbanger type of guy. And he's excited to see me. Yo, what's up, Fish? My little cousin, man. I'm furious inside, right? But I'm not letting him know that. And so he obviously knows why I'm there. He's like, yo, would my mom come to see you? And I make it like I'm not that pissed. I say, yeah, she's all right, Mike. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean? She's with my mother. She'll be fine. I just came out here to make sure you're all right. This is my buddy right here, and I introduce him to my friend. And I don't tell him my friend's name either. I give him a fake name on purpose. I say, this is my friend Mike, or whatever I tell him, this guy, oh, yo, come on in, come upstairs. And he brings me upstairs in the brownstone. And when we walk into his room, there's like three guys there. Men too, like guys in their 30s and 40s. I could see they're all high. They're all hanging out in there getting high, and they look like some tough guys too. And Michael was a tough guy as well, even though he was messed up. So I meet them all. He's like, "Yo, this is my little cousin. What's up, guys? What's up? How you doing?" And they're all sitting around smoking, getting high, whatever. And he said, my cousin's the type of guy that likes to show off. He likes to show off stuff. That's the way he is. He's like, yo, check this out. He opens up a trunk. He pulls out an AR-15, and he's showing me all these different machine guns he's got. He's got an AK-47. He's got an AR-15. He had like two rare Russian machine guns, fully loaded, and so as soon as I see all this, I says, I'm taking all this from him. You know what I mean? I'm taking everything this guy got. That's going to be his payback for what he did, and I'm just thinking that right now. And then so he's like, yo, he continues to show off stuff. Yo, check this out. He goes in his closet. He pulls out a bottle of angel dust. Very, very expensive. It's liquid angel dust, right? A small bottle of angel dust like this can be like $600, just a small vial. And he pulls out like a liter bottle of angel dust, very, very expensive stuff. And so he's showing off everything to me. And just as I'm taking all this. So me and Craig hang out there, for an hour or two, and I tell him, yo, listen, I'm going to come out here again. We'll hang out, this, that. He's like, yeah, yeah. So after about an hour or two, I leave. And I tell Craig, yo, I'm robbing. I'm taking everything he has. That's how I'm paying him back, And it's the following weekend. The next weekend comes up. I call Craig again. I said, you want to take a ride out there with me? And so let's go. And we jump in the car. We head out to Brooklyn. And I park right on his corner. He doesn't know I'm coming, and he doesn't know I'm there. I park right on his corner across the street so he wouldn't be able to see me. I got the set of binoculars and everything. And then I call him. Yo, Mikey, what's happening? Yo, what's up, little cousin? What's happening? So I said, yo, I was going to come drive out there and come see you tonight. I'm going to come out there. And so he says, I'm going out tonight. Why don't you come tomorrow? I says, no problem, which was perfect for me. I hang up the phone and I just wait. And it takes about an hour or two. I see a car pull up in front of his house. I watch him get in the car and leave. I said, let's go. Boom. We make our move. pull up in his driveway. I take some tape. I walk up to his front door. I take some tape and I tape up this little window in his front door, knock it out with my elbow, reach in, unlock the door, open the door, and his pit bull runs right out into the street. He had the dog. Now I got to go chase this dog. I can't have his dog running around the street. So now I chase the dog. I get the dog. I bring it back in the house. We go right upstairs where I know everything is. I tell Craig, listen, I just want you to lean in the window and look out onto the street. Make sure he doesn't pull up. Make sure he doesn't pull up no matter what, because he's probably got a pistola on him. You know what I mean? And so the first thing I do is I look in the trunk. There's all the machine guns. I take them, carry them downstairs, put the trunk by the front door. Go in the closet, find the thing of angel dust hidden behind some T-shirts, wrap that in a couple of T-shirts, run downstairs, put that by the front door. Then he's got 3 great bear jugs. You know, the 5.5 gallon great bear jugs, the big water jugs, right? That go in the water dispenser, right? He's got 3 of those filled to the top with quarters, not change, just quarters, because he was robbing New York Telephone. He used to work for New York Telephone, and in those days they had the payphones. He had the key to the payphones, and he was robbing New York Telephone, filling up these quarters. So I got to take these jugs. So I go to move the jug. I can't, this thing is crazy. 150, 175 pounds when I grab it. I said, oh my God. So I'm kind of rolling the jug over to the front steps. And when I try and bring it down the front step, it falls and I lose control of it. And there's $3,000 worth of quarters. It was so loud, it fell down the steps in the brownstone. All the glass was breaking, all the quarters all over the place. It was insanity. So I got to get Craig out of the window to help me. We take a blanket off the bed. We put the other one in the blanket like a hammock, like a cradle. We lower it down step by step. I get the 2 jugs of quarters. So now by the steps, I got the guns in the chest. I got the angel dust. I got the 2 jugs of quarters, and I go back to look through the house. First drawer I pull open, there's a knot of $100 bills. Turns out to be 10 grand in cash. There's a knot in the $100 bills. I take that, stick it in my pants. I told Craig, let's go. You good? Yeah, let's go. Let's get out of here. I put everything in the car, bounce, go home, right? Got to drive careful. My car is loaded. I bring everything home, and I wait until the next afternoon, and I call Michael. He answers the phone. I say, yo, what's up? I says, I'm going to come out there and hang out tonight. He's going crazy. He doesn't suspect it was me. Yo, my house got fucking robbed. They took everything. I says, oh my God, holy shit, this, that. Yo, did they get this? Did they get that? Did they get this? And once he's all done talking, I said, listen, Mike, let me tell you something. What? I says, I got all your shit at my house. He said, what is this, some kind of joke? I said, it's no joke, Michael. I said, you pushed my aunt down a flight of steps? You pushed my 70-year-old aunt down a flight of steps? I said, I got all your shit right here. I said, you want to come get it? Come get it. But I want you to remember, I have a loaded AK-47. I have a loaded AR-15. And I got a bunch of people here waiting for you to come and get it, right? So I really believe that he's going to come and get it, because he's not too stable of a person. But he does know that I'm strapped hard now, right? So I call a few of my friends over, the guys that I'm close with, right? And I said, listen, I could have a little problem. You know what I mean? A couple of my good boys came over. These guys were serious. And then they were unstable because they start smoking the angel dust. And I got to tell you this image. It sounds funny, you know what I mean? But it's crazy. I had a friend named Lovies, right? Lovies he just passed away recently. I love this guy. Lovies looked like a silverback gorilla. Okay, he was 5'10", 240 pounds of muscle. He was completely a scary, scary individual. He loved to fight. He loved to wrestle. He was 240 pounds at 5'10", solid muscle. He was a freak of nature, right, genetically. He's sitting in my window, and he had a bandana tied around his head like he's freaking Rambo, smoking a joint of angel dust with an AR-15 fully loaded. And he looks at me. He says, let him come. I hope he comes, you know, and he never showed up. He never showed up. He never came to get it, you know, and that was a wrap. He got a lesson taught to him. He pushed my aunt. My aunt never wanted to go back, and it was her house. She had a lot of money. She says, "I'm never going back there. Let him keep the house." My aunt ended up moving down to Florida. She bought a house in Florida, and she stayed down there until her death. She never ever went back. Right. So about a year goes by, maybe a little longer. And I have Craig over my house, and we're reminiscing about the story, And I tell him, "Yo, that was crazy." I says, "I feel bad." I still felt a little bad because he was like my cousin. You know what I mean? Even though he was adopted, I felt bad. But that was the wrong thing to do to my aunt when I was a crazy 20-year-old kid. No matter how you guys that are watching this story interpret the story, whether I was right or wrong, I was a 20-year-old crazy kid, and you push my aunt down a flight of steps. And as I've said in other stories, he's lucky that's all I did. You know what I mean? Because I ended up going to prison for murder. You know what I mean? And so he was lucky that was all I did to him. He was my cousin, and so he caught a break by just getting everything taken from him. You know, just like in the story I told about the friendship, my other buddy, he was lucky that I didn't do something worse. A lot of people get lucky, but whatever, that's a different story. So a year or two passes by, and me and Craig are reminiscing about the story. And so I said, "Yo, I'm going to drive out there, and I says, I'm going to see if we could make up, see if we could put, it's a year or two. So the emotions are gone, hopefully, and we'll see. But I'm not going out there without a pistol. That would be stupid. You know what I mean? And so me and Craig, I had puppy Rottweilers too at the time. My dog just had puppies. I says, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to bring 5 grand cash. I'm going to bring a puppy Rottweiler. I'm going to give him the good gesture and tell him, yo, listen, I'm sorry that happened. Right? So I drive out there. And when I pull up in front of his house, there's a woman in front of the house washing a car. I'd never seen her before. She's in the driveway of the house. So I roll down the window. "How you doing, miss?" She says, "Hi, how are you?" I said, "Is Michael here?" "Who?" I said, "Michael so-and-so, She said, "Oh, he doesn't live here anymore. He moved." So I said, "Oh, I'm his little cousin." And she said, "Oh, well, are you going to see him? Because I got a bunch of mail here for him." And so I says, "No, I don't know if I'm going to see him or not, So I never got to find out where he went to. I never got to find out what happened to him. I would only learn later on that he ended up ODing and dying from a heroin overdose. About a year or two after that, after I was incarcerated, my aunt Elaine let me know that he OD'd and died of a drug overdose. So that was the story of when my cousin Mikey pushed my aunt Elaine down a flight of steps. He had to get what was coming to him. I figured I'd give you a little bit of a wild story today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll hit you off with another one soon. You guys take care. Take care. Hit the subscribe button, man. Hit the subscribe button.